Marie Antoinette ranks as one of the most well-known women in our history. She made herself popularly and notably well known for her profligate spending and her frivolities. This is often the image that people have of her. Nevertheless, Marie Antoinette's life was much more than that. She was born on November 2nd, 1755, in Vienna, Austria, the daughter of Maria Theresa of Austria and Francis I of the Holy Roman Empire. She was the second to last of the couple's 16 children, and her baptismal name was Maria Antonia Josepha Joanna. In France, she was called Marie Antoinette years later. The childhood of the Austrian Archduchess was uneventful, filled with fun games with her brothers and sisters. She was a spoiled child by her family, and her mother was slightly absent due to her duties as head of state. She did not particularly enjoy studying and reached the age of 12 without correctly speaking or writing either German or French. While she was a cheerful girl, when it came to her studies, she was lazy and uninterested. The Viennese abbot Vermond, who was called upon to be the girl's tutor to give her a little more culture and etiquette, succeeded in making some intellectual progress. In 1765, Marie Antoinette lost her father to a stroke, which left Maria Theresa alone in the burdensome mission of guiding her children through life. These were times of important political alliances, which happened through marriages. Austria and France were longtime opponents, and the beautiful Marie Antoinette was the chance to establish an alliance between the two countries through marriage. The young woman was promised to the Dauphin Louis Augustus of Bourbon. For months and months, preparations were made for the sumptuous engagement. There was no way that anything could go wrong. When the long-awaited date arrived, Maria Theresa summoned her daughter to spend the nights in her chambers, foreseeing this as an opening to have lengthy conversations to advise her about her future position as Queen of France. The great day finally came. Marie Antoinette was at last to be married. The bride was no more than a 14-year-old girl, extremely beautiful, classy, nice, cheerful, and rosy-cheeked. Furthermore, she had good character and temperament. 2 weddings took place. One was in Vienna in April 1770, done by proxy, in which Maximilian, Marie Antoinette's brother, played the role of groom. The Austrian girl then left for France in a parade of dozens of carriages to finally meet her fiancé, until then a total stranger to her. Forced to leave behind everything that was in any way related to her Austrian life, she first met King Louis XV in France. Afterward, for the first time, she saw the shy Dauphin Louis Augustus. He was also just as young and inexperienced in life as she was, and some considered him to be an awkward and not very clever lad. The French wedding took place on May the 16th. Amid much pageantry and great excitement from the people of France, who hoped for better days ahead. The celebration took place in the chapel of Louis XII, in which only noble families were admitted. Next, a feast was held in the Palace of Versailles, with a lavish banquet for the members of the royal household. Once the celebration was over, Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were taken to their rooms, and the Archbishop of Rome, who officiated at the wedding, anointed the couple's bed with holy water. But the blessing was not entirely effective. The newlyweds did not consummate their marriage on their wedding night. The situation lingered for approximately 7 years, resulting in derisive jokes, mean comments, and derisive eyes throughout the court. Back then, the married life of a noble couple was no secret to anybody, as the throne succession was at stake, a fact that was of interest to many. In letters exchanged with her mother, Marie Antoinette often complained about her ill fortune. Time passed, and the young woman, embarrassed and bewildered by her marital situation, turned all her energy and enthusiasm to pleasures, such as banquets, parties, games, and all kinds of trifles that could make her forget the disillusionment she had to face in her marital life. For his part, Louis XVI dabbled in hunting and physical activity to compensate for his shortcomings as a husband. While he did not agree with Marie Antoinette's excesses, he refrained from saying anything because he felt like a fractious man who did not know how to assert his will. The Dauphine's demeanor gave rise to slander, jokes, and gossip about possible lovers. Louis XVI's two brothers, the Count of Provence and the Count of Artois, who were looking for a chance to inherit the throne if Marie Antoinette and her husband remained childless, relished the couple's pitiable state of affairs. The young Austrian, often so childlike and yet so spirited, became uncomfortable with all the etiquette and officialdom she encountered around her. As often as she was reminded and asked about her court position, she found it very upsetting to submit to so much formality at all times. This ran counter to her nature, which longed for the freedom to enjoy life. Maria Theresa was preoccupied. Two of her daughters were married already and were hardly a source of pride for their mother, as they did not exhibit good manners and proper moral behavior. As for Marie Antoinette, Maria Theresa sensed good traits in her daughter, such as her genuineness, generosity, and easy temper, but she was keenly conscious of the girl's lack of maturity and unwillingness to commit herself to more substantial matters. Marie Antoinette had an overwhelming urge to go to Paris, but most of her husband's relatives thought the opposite of the girl. They were afraid of overstating her future position as queen, afraid of a welcome that could have been too warm for the crowd, and they attempted to find a way to postpone her grand entrance parade to Paris. Eventually, she grew tired of waiting and went in person to her father-in-law, Louis XV, who immediately granted her request and told her to choose a suitable date to finally have the triumphal parade. On June 8, 1773, Marie Antoinette achieved her great wish, entering Paris amidst much revelry, flowers, greetings, and joy. The happy people enthusiastically waved at the sight of the young couple, more impressed by the beautiful and smiling Delphine than by her husband. Marie Antoinette was thrilled with Paris, and often, together with her friends, slipped away from the cold Versailles, dressed up as an ordinary person, to enjoy the warm evenings of the city, attending balls, theaters, and casinos. But her husband hardly ever joined her on these evenings. In 1774, something changed the way of Versailles. The victim of smallpox, King Louis XV, died on his royal bed, surrounded by his children and his mistress, Madame du Barry. After this event, the French people were overjoyed with Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who had now become the king and queen of France. Everyone apparently welcomed the young couple in power, except for Maria Theresa. She was a knowledgeable woman and worried about her daughter's fate as if she had already knew it could be dreadful. This prediction made her give the young queen a great deal of advice, telling her to avoid spending too much money and urging her to try to make the people happy. Her mother's warnings were of no use. Marie Antoinette did not manage to focus on anything serious. Even in her position as queen, all she cared about was having fun, making the most of every moment. The royal couple got along well, albeit they were remarkably different from each other. Louis XVI was quiet, shy, cold, and hesitant. She was a giggling, spontaneous, warm, and lively woman. Although Marie Antoinette held the important position of queen, she was unwilling to leave her trivial world. She was not interested in getting to know the people she ruled. She couldn't understand the difficulties they were going through. Yet perhaps she acted this way because her life had changed dramatically in a short period. On top of this, at her young age, a touch of immatureness and even childishness was bound to come into play when dealing first with married life, and then with the life of a queen, constantly besieged by the pampering and attention of everybody at court. As a queen, her main concerns were what to wear, what kind of jewelry or different hairstyle to use, and she wasted considerable money on all of this. The year that Louis XV died, Antoinette was presented with a gift by her husband. The little Trianon, a luxurious building with the Versailles garden. It was a tiny place that the late king had built for his mistress, Madame de Pompadour. She passed away before the project was completed, however, and so the Trianon was left to Madame du Barry. Now, with Louis XVI in power, the property had been given to Marie Antoinette. Always looking for something to entertain herself, the young queen devoted much of her time to this new gift, expanding the premises. She ordered the construction of a theater and a magnificent garden, and the Trianon became the playground for parties, balls, and banquets. In the grand scheme of things, a staggering amount of money was spent by the queen, and her capriciousness was dreadfully noted by the court and the people. Marie Antoinette often spent time at the Trianon, aloof from the coldness of the Versailles palace and her duties as queen. Just the year the king died, the queen, craving new emotions, was introduced to the gallant Hans Axel von Fersen, a young man from Sweden, at a masquerade ball in Paris. He was completely oblivious that the attractive young woman he had fallen for was Marie Antoinette. The two only shared a few words at this first meeting, but both left a lasting impression. Another meeting followed a few years later, and they became great friends. Fersen joined the army later, and eventually distanced himself from the queen for a while. Truth be told, the relationship that arose between them was not something short-lived. Rather, it was a love that lasted for many years. While discreet, they elicited some remarks. Nevertheless, during all the difficult times that Marie Antoinette would go through in the future, he was there to support her, whether physically present or not, constantly showing concern for the well-being and safety of his beloved queen. Overwhelmed by the way things were going and trying to strengthen the alliance between France and Austria, Joseph II, Marie Antoinette's brother, called in to visit the royal couple. He sought to advise the two. With Louis XVI, he had an honest conversation about what a man's role should be in married life. With his sister, he broached the excesses of futility, wantonness, and financial spending that she had been perpetuating for so long. The marriage of Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI was finally consummated in 1777, perhaps by sheer happenstance, or because Joseph II's talk really paid off. From then on, they lived a satisfactory life as husband and wife. To everyone's happiness, in 1778, Marie Antoinette, after so many years of hoping, gave birth to a baby girl, who was named after her maternal grandmother, Maria Theresa. In 1780, Marie Antoinette's mother, so keen on having a grandchild to inherit the throne of France, died of pneumonia. Just 1 year after her death, the queen had her long-awaited son, Louis-Joseph, who was greeted with lavish festivities, and who would die at a very young age of tuberculosis in 1789. The couple had 2 more children, a boy in 1785 named Louis Charles, and a premature baby girl in 1786 named Sophia Beatrice. Unfortunately, the latter died before she was 1 year old, which triggered a deep depression in Marie Antoinette. Although she was a mother, Marie Antoinette still kept her leisure activities at the Trianon, detaching herself as much as possible from her duties as queen, save when she wanted to appoint one of the people in her groups who followed her to some post. This behavior on her part ended up engendering hatred from the court members, and most especially from the French people in general. To compound the queen's situation, who was already so foul-mouthed, the well-known episode of the diamond necklace occurred. A woman named Jeanne de Valois, better known as Countess de la Motte, needed some money, albeit from a good family. A cunning idea came to her mind that she implemented together with her husband Rateau de Villette. She addressed the Cardinal of Rohan, whom Marie Antoinette was not fond of, telling him that she was a great friend of the Queen, and that Marie Antoinette was in dire need of a tremendous sum of money to buy a diamond necklace. She also commented that, according to the Queen's words, if Rohan was inclined to help her with money, his dream of becoming the Prime Minister of France would be granted. The naive man gave the Countess the exact amount requested. The Countess commissioned the necklace from a jeweler, and she, with the jewelry in hand, traveled with her husband to London to resell it to keep the money. The swindle only came to light when the necklace's invoice reached the Palace of Versailles. The jewelers, also duped by the Countess, were convinced that the necklace was in the Queen's hands and that she would pay attention to the installments. The charade was eventually unmasked, and the Count was sent into exile for it. On the other hand, the Countess of Valois was sentenced to forced labor. Nevertheless, someone made it easier for her to escape from the palace where she was imprisoned. No one knows for sure who it was, but it led to some comments that Marie Antoinette had been instrumental in making the escape easier. This incident only added to Marie Antoinette's infamy. People kept making lists and lists of her supposed lovers. She was pardoned nothing, and her name was vilified further each day. People in France were permanently exhausted from hoping for better days. Lacking bread on their tables, their unrest continued to grow. To make matters worse, the Minister of France ended up divulging an undreamed-of debt incurred under Louis XVI. Once again, the French blamed Marie Antoinette and made their anger at her very clear. Albeit late in life, Marie Antoinette came to realize the consequences of her thoughtless and nonchalant behavior. She remained more reclusive and turned her attention to her children and husband. Sadly, it was already too late. On July 14, 1789, a mob burst into the Bastille, a prison where people were kept if they were somehow a threat to absolutism. The storming parties released a few prisoners there and looted the gunpowder kept there. This started the French Revolution. Paris was visibly in turmoil as a result of the people's unrest, and the Versailles Palace emptied slowly. All those who lived there feared the future and considered it best to flee, frighten, and camouflage, trying not to be spotted by the rebellious crowd. But Louis XVI and his wife stayed behind, along with their children. As the royal couple waited for an outcome, Paris burned. A revolutionary spirit was underway. Eventually, an army of women and cross-dressing men with guns, even cannons, was assembled and marched towards the palace. It was October the 5th. Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI were enjoying a normal day, swept along by the idea that the whole revolt would soon be over, and life would go back to the way it was before. But a courier interrupted their apparent quietude when he arrived and handed Marie Antoinette a letter informing her of a mob that was on its way. She quickly joined her husband and ministers, who advised the couple to flee at once. The conversation took time, for, as always, the king was unsure how to proceed. The rabble arrived at the palace gates as they screamed. They were now too late to think about leaving. The king then welcomed some women representing the group and promised them what they wanted, but this did not make the crowd quit. They remained there all night, camped out. The following morning, men and women stormed the palace to get to the queen's room. At the entrance, they viciously slaughtered 2 guards who were on royal duty. A frightened Marie Antoinette quickly reunited with her husband and children. The crowd wanted the people to go to Paris. Before long, a carriage with the royal family departed towards the capital, and they settled in the Tuileries, an ancient residence used by kings. Antoinette and her husband spent their days there in seclusion. During this time in her life, the queen, fearful and deprived of her leisure and carefree life, grew more reflective and engaged in meetings with ministers and ambassadors. Marie Antoinette did not believe in better days at this time, and, under these circumstances, her peaceful and happy moments came only when she was in the gentle company of her children. A Republican atmosphere was growing, and the threat kept rising. As time went by, it became evident that the couple had only one solution: escaping, which took place on the night of July the 20th, 1791. After careful planning, and with the help of a few faithful people, the family fled at dawn in a carriage. Together with the king, the queen, her children, and the king's sister Isabella. Everyone had forged passports. They were discovered, however, after many hours of travel, and intense worry and fatigue forced them to return to Paris. Their return trip was protracted and painful, with numerous insults along the way and angry stares from the population. Resettled again in Paris, and in direct view of the angry people, Marie Antoinette and her husband no longer had much to do. The people clamored for the Republic, and Marie Antoinette knew very well that for the Republic to be established, she, her children, and the king would have to be gone. The Republic was finally proclaimed on September the 21st, 1792. The royal family was imprisoned. It was the end of the monarchy. They were incarcerated in the Tower of the Temple, a monastery formerly used by the Knights Templar. In just a few months, Louis XVI was convicted and killed on the guillotine. It was January the 21st, 1793. Just moments before he died, he requested that a lock of hair and a signet ring be sent to his family as a memento. Poor Marie Antoinette was dealt with another gruesome blow. Shortly after her husband's grisly execution, her son, Louis Charles, was removed from his cell, leaving only her daughter Maria Theresa, and her husband's late sister, Madame Elizabeth, in the Temple. In most respects, Marie Antoinette barely reminisced of the young woman of earlier times. Now approaching 40, she had a sullen, downcast, silent, and somber visage, as opposed to all that she had once been in her youth. Not long after the coercive separation from her son, she was also taken from the place and sent to the conciergerie, a prison from which one seldom made it out alive. Not only had she suffered, but another agonizing event presented itself. She was unjustly accused of incest with her own son, who was still a child under the guardianship of a rude and illiterate shoemaker. These accusations were added to many others against her. A trial was held and Marie Antoinette was sentenced to death. On the fateful day, the unfortunate woman seemed calm. She was brought to the spot of her death in white clothes. She now looked like an aging woman due to the sheer suffering and the bleeding she had been experiencing, most likely a sign of uterine cancer, as well as possible tuberculosis. The Queen's execution was swift, and the crowd shouted, "Long live the Republic," while the executioner displayed her blood-soaked head. Generally speaking, her death did not seem to stir any commotion, although one person greatly felt her passing. Fersen, who after Antoinette's death grew gloomy in the face of the world's iniquities. The memories of his beloved lover were still very much alive when he died in 1810 at the age of 54. Madame Isabella, the younger sister of Louis XVI, who had shared unhappy and solitary days with her sister-in-law in the Temple Tower, was also executed. Meanwhile, Marie Antoinette's beloved son was taken away from his guardian and trapped in a cell where he was utterly ostracized. Sick, deprived of the slightest care, he passed away in 1795. The sole survivor was firstborn Maria Theresa, who married her cousin, the Duke of Angoulême. She passed away at the age of 72. Marie Antoinette's life took many turns. Removed so early from her mother's watchful eyes to marry a total stranger and live in a foreign country, she did not know how to be what was expected of her. Very young, inexperienced, and unripe for a life so packed with rules and etiquette, she took on the position of queen without yet being accountable for it. When she was ostensibly mature enough to play her noble role, she did not have time for it.